presidential election year, which brings a lot of excitement and people out to vote. Oftentimes, this excitement can overshadow the issues or ballot measures that people will see when they go to vote in November. The Public Policy Center and Cooperative Extension Service, both part of the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture, have developed a voter guide and other resources to help you learn more about the issues you'll see on the November ballot. We offer you a neutral summary of what you might see on Election Day.
Issue 1 on this year's ballot involves the terms, election, and eligibility of local elected officials. There are 4 parts to this proposal. First, this proposal would increase the length of office for an elected county official from 2 years to 4 years. If approved, county judges, clerks, sheriffs, treasurers, tax collectors, assessors, coroners, and county surveyors would have 4-year terms starting in 2018. This change would not apply to justices of the peace who serve on the quorum court. Issue 1 would also prohibit all elected county officials from being appointed or elected to any other civil office at the same time. This proposal would apply to justices of the peace in addition to all the county offices I previously listed. The proposal doesn't define what a civil office is, but the court system in the past has defined it to mean a position that has the authority of the state to act, or an office created by law within one of the 3 branches of government. It could also be an appointment or a position that requires you to take an oath of office. Some examples of a civil office include mayor, alderman, municipal judge, city attorney, a county parks and recreation commissioner, or even a county election commissioner or member of a drainage improvement district. Another thing this proposal would do, if passed, is allow legislators to pass laws that say unopposed candidates can be elected without the candidate's name appearing on the ballot, or in some cases, even without holding an election if there are no other offices or issues on the ballot. Finally, Issue 1 would define infamous crime in the Constitution when talking about who can hold office. Currently, someone who's arrested for an infamous crime can't hold office. However, the Constitution doesn't define the term. Over the years, the courts have decided that the term infamous crime refers to someone convicted of a crime involving deceit or dishonesty or election fraud, but the Constitution still doesn't have a definition. Under the proposed amendment, an infamous crime would include a felony offense, abuse of office as defined under Arkansas law, tampering as defined under Arkansas law, or a misdemeanor offense involving an act of deceit, fraud, or false statement, including misdemeanor offenses related to the election process. Look to the Public Policy Center's voter guide on the ballot issues if you have more questions about Issue 1. Arkansas's Constitution describes the role and duties of the governor and who is in charge when the governor is unable to lead. Issue 2 on this year's ballot is a constitutional amendment that asks voters to allow the governor to remain in charge when out of state. Right now, anytime the governor leaves the state, the lieutenant governor is in charge. If the lieutenant governor also leaves Arkansas, the Senate's president pro tem becomes acting governor. This proposal would end that practice, though this line of succession would remain in place if for some reason the governor is unable to fulfill the office's duties, resigns, is impeached, or dies in office.
Issue 3 proposes several changes to the state's constitution regarding economic development. If passed, it would remove a limit on how much the state can issue in bonds for large economic development projects. Bonds are debt issued by a government agency to pay for an expensive project or purchase. Similar to taking out a home mortgage, the debt is paid off over time. The Constitution currently says the state can issue bonds in amount of up to 5% of the state's general revenue. Currently, the Arkansas Constitution prohibits cities and counties from obtaining or providing money for corporations, associations, institutions, or individuals. Issue 3 would remove that prohibition and allow counties and cities to pay outside groups for economic development projects and services. The proposed amendment would also change the authority of counties and cities to issue bonds for economic development projects instead of industrial development. If passed, the amendment would also allow state legislators to authorize the use of other taxes to pay off city and county bond debt for economic development projects. Currently, cities and counties are restricted to the use of special tax revenues for this purpose. Finally, the proposed amendment would remove a requirement that city and county bonds be sold only at public sale and allow counties, cities, towns, and school districts to enter into agreements or compacts to partner on economic development projects.
Issue 4 is a proposed constitutional amendment that would allow legislators to pass laws limiting how much attorneys can receive from their clients in medical injury lawsuits. Right now, the Supreme Court makes the rules on how courts operate, and there is no limit on how much attorneys are paid. The proposed amendment would prohibit attorneys from collecting more than 1/3 the amount of money their client receives in medical injury lawsuits. Anything over that amount would be considered an excessive contingency fee, which would be illegal under the amendment. Legislators would also be required to set a maximum amount that people can receive in non-economic damages. Legislators would have to set that maximum amount, but they could not go under $250,000. And when we talk about non-economic damages, those are pain and suffering type of injuries, something that would leave you unable to pick up a child or unable to walk. The Supreme Court would be required to review that amount every 2 years to adjust it for inflation or for deflation. Voters will see a proposed constitutional amendment on the ballot that would allow 3 casinos to operate in the state. Issue 5 names specific companies that would be allowed to operate a casino in Boone, Miller, and Washington counties. The amendment would create the Arkansas Gaming Commission to regulate and oversee the 3 casinos. The proposal says the casinos could operate any time of day and could serve alcohol any time of day. The amendment would establish a tax that the casinos would pay to the state, county, and city where they operate based on how much money they collect in gaming receipts after players' winnings are subtracted. Because the proposal names specific companies that would be allowed to operate casinos, no other casinos would be allowed under this proposal. This proposal would not affect electronic gaming at the 2 racetracks in Arkansas. Voters will see 2 proposals on this year's ballot related to medical marijuana. There are many differences between the 2 proposals, which you can read about in Extension's voter guide. Issue 6 on this year's ballot is the Arkansas Medical Marijuana Amendment. It would legalize the growing, distribution, sale, and use of marijuana for medical purposes under state law. This proposal would allow a person to go to their doctor and get a note saying that they have one of the many medical conditions listed in the proposal. The person would then take the note to the health department to receive an identification card that would allow them to go to a dispensary and buy marijuana. A person could buy no more than 2.5 ounces of marijuana every 2 weeks. Cultivation facilities would grow the medical marijuana, which would then be sold at dispensaries. The amendment calls for at least 20, but no more than 40 dispensary licenses to be issued, and they would be regulated and overseen by the Arkansas Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission and the newly created Medical Marijuana Commission. Local governments would have the right to limit the number of dispensaries in their communities and enact zoning laws that affect where a dispensary can locate. State taxes collected on the sale of medical marijuana under this proposal would go to the State General Revenue Fund and to several educational and workforce training funds. Local sales tax would also apply.
Issue 7, the Arkansas Medical Cannabis Act, would legalize the growth, production, distribution, and consumption of marijuana for medical purposes under state law. It would recognize that the drug remains illegal under federal laws. The proposed act would allow a person to go to their doctor and get a note saying they have one of the qualifying medical conditions listed in the law. The person would take that note to the health department to receive a registry identification card. This card would allow them to go to a dispensary and buy marijuana. A person could buy no more than 2.5 ounces of marijuana every 2 weeks. The proposed law establishes rules for how the process would work, from growing to distribution and sales. it would charge the Arkansas Health Department with establishing additional rules to regulate the industry. The proposal states there could be 1 dispensary for every 20 pharmacies in the state, which right now would mean 39 dispensaries. Local governments would have the right to limit the number of dispensaries in their community and to enact zoning laws regulating where a dispensary can operate. Under this law, people without dispensaries near them could grow up to 10 plants for their own use. A person would need an additional permit from the Arkansas Health Department to grow their own marijuana. Under this proposal, state sales taxes collected from the sale of medical marijuana would be used to offset the costs of regulating the industry and to provide assistance for low-income Arkansans to purchase medical marijuana. Local sales taxes would apply. We hope this information will help you make an informed decision when you go to vote in the 2016 general election. For more detailed information, including what supporters and opponents are saying about these issues, visit our website at uaex.edu/ballot or contact your County Cooperative Extension Service office.